Johnny, yo, we in the building. We're gonna try to do these kind of quick, but lately we've been doing talking about grocery stores because, as you guys know, stores like Walgreens are closing. I don't think. Listen, I don't think that you guys really understand what that means. Walgreens is closing. Let me make sure I sound good. Yeah, you guys, you haven't really factored into what all that details Walgreens closing. Like, and that's what I talk about a lot. Like, we don't. What was that? We don't. That stuff really doesn't bother us anymore. I think, and I used to always. They used to tell us like when they show us images of like people being like sprayed and stuff like that, and just bad images in the world, and then we see 9/11 over and over and over and over again. They said that stuff desensitizes us, and I knew that. Like as I was younger, I heard them say that stuff desensitizes us, and I think that's like a lot of what you're seeing nowadays. Today, like we don't care, we don't want to speak up about anything, and I mean if that's your preference, that's cool. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but stuff is going to happen whether you like it or not because they know that you're not going to speak up. So in that sense, I would say like somebody should say something about something. Otherwise, it's bad. It's bad, you know. Um, so that's what we're dealing with. And then we talk about like grocery stores, and I had mentioned yesterday that grocery stores have clauses. There's clauses in grocery stores. The clause is that if a grocery store comes in, set up shop, and they leave, no grocery store can exist there for like 15 years. That's like nationwide. Now, Kroger's a nationwide brand, so 9 times out of 10, they would have some type of clause like that in their contract because they want to protect their brand, their image. It's all about them protecting their money. Nothing about feeding people. That's a second. As you guys seen, that's second to last. When they came, they made their money. When they made their money, they was like, we up. I just I think I think a lot of it is too, and you look at it like stores really don't like food stamps a whole lot. I kind of get that, you know, I kind of get that feel sometimes. Like, and I don't know how many I realize that. Like I said, like when you come up with your link card, and it's easier now. You don't have to sit and count out bills. You can just swipe the card. But it seems like stores don't really like that no more. Like people have attitudes. People behind you be like, dang, they getting their food for free. Because basically you're getting your food for free. And a lot of us have to pay for food. I'll be happy when people give me link. I'll be happy. I brag. That's why they probably stopped giving me a link. They're like, he don't need no link. No, I'm just joking. They going through their thing, so they need their link. It's not a yeah. It's going around. It's like that around the whole country. They have clauses in their contracts. It's like when you work a job and they say, yeah, you can go work another job, but you can't do what you did here. Whatever you did here, you got to wait like 5 years to go do something else. That's corporate America. Like they do stuff like that to protect their interests. It's not about the people. Never was. So now this is what I'm saying, Mrs. Young. If you think about that, then like a corporate chain like Walgreens, 9 times out of 10 is going to have a clause like that. CVS. And that's why when you see like CVS's and Walmart's down, they lead in big old buildings. That's why you don't see shit in there for 10, 15 years. Because you could come in, like another company could come in, but you would have to do some major demolition because it's built up like it's built as like a drugstore inside. You know what I'm saying? You're not gonna have no club in there, and you have to tear shit out. People ain't gonna want to do all that work, and then your business might not work. You if you're gonna do a club, you want to go get a club looking building, and those buildings are gonna look like you walk in, people gonna be like, "Damn, this CVS all over again." You know what I'm saying? So, and nobody has enough money if you're gonna do a grocery store to fill those big of stores up. Your store would look silly if you only had like 3 or 4 racks in that big of, you know what I'm saying, area. 15 racks. It'll look silly to have 15 racks in that small area. You know what I'm saying? So you're not gonna want to go in there and put nothing in there. So it's like they got it on lock just in case we decide to come back. I guess that's what it is. It's an open clause. Just in case we might come back. We might come back on that ass. Just maybe, but I don't know. Let me look. The East Bluff, I don't know. We might come back. But what I'm saying is, he said definitely right. What I'm saying is there's a clause. So I'm sure there's a clause with Walgreens, sadly but true, that says that no one can come in there for at least, I'm gonna say the minimum, at least 5 years. So no drugs, but you're gonna be able to get drugs on the East Bluff. Not to worry, you're gonna get drugs on East Bluff. I'm, I'm joking. That's a joke. But no, there's not gonna be like drugs like that on the East Bluff or wherever they close. There's not gonna be anything there. We live in an area in a time where you're seeing the major chains close. The major chains. These and this is the wicked thing about it. Okay. There used to be mom and pop uh drug stores. Like how many people remember Lincoln Pharmacy? If you remember Lincoln Pharmacy, send some emojis. A smiley emoji. If you remember Lincoln Pharmacy, send a smiley emojis right now. And reason why I'm gonna tell you to send smiley emojis is because that was a happy place. If you remember Lincoln Pharmacy and the penny candy, send emojis after church. I'm taking y'all way back. I'm trying to prove a point. So if you remember Lincoln Pharmacy, send some emojis. Okay, I lost everybody. Nobody remember We'll get this video played in a second. Hold on, I'm gonna make my point. Then we're gonna play this video. But Lincoln Pharmacy was a like mom and pop type drugstores, and you had those around the country. You had mom and pop drugstores to where it was only a few of them, right? And this is the wicked thing. Remember when Walgreens came down there and walked? I mean, what am I saying? Am I saying it right? Walgreens came down there to the South End, and they was right down there on the South End, right? Start selling their drugs. Remember that? I don't know if y'all remember that. Walgreens was right there on that corner on the South End when you come down Western. That was Walgreens right there. The Lincoln Pharmacy was down there. Walgreens came down there. We did our penny candy and shit, getting our little drugs and shit. Your grandma getting her little drugs and all that. Surviving. Walmart came down there, put Lincoln Pharmacy out of business, and left and went further up Main Street. Instead of staying there and investing all of their money in the South End. Walgreens and I hate to say this word, y'all. Walgreens nutted on Peoria. Been nutting on Peoria. They was down. They had the biggest building downtown Peoria. They got their money. If you go to Walgreens and they bathrooms and stuff right now, you'll see pictures of when they was downtown Peoria and they was riding bikes to deliver. because they didn't have to go up the hill to deliver medicine. Most people lived on the south end, so they could just ride over to the Harrison or ride to the Taft homes, and they deliver your medicine, or ride to wherever on the south end, Millman Street, deliver your medicine. Right, that's how they got down. But they took their business from the south end and went straight up to Main Street and left everybody. I remember we was kids. We was like, damn, Walgreens did this twice. I remember Walgreens did it then. Because we used to, like, if it was like, okay, say if I had a girl, a little female or whatever, and hold on. Hello, this is Johnny. Yes, it is. Uh-huh. Okay. That's a good question. Can I give you a phone number to call? And they should be able to help you out with that. Okay, you ready? Mm-hmm. 309 670 1291. That's customer service. Mhm. Oh, no problem. If you know anybody else who wants service, let them know. And then if they get signed up, I'll give you half a month off. I need some business. I'm struggling right now. All right, thank you. Bye. Okay. So we are back. So I'm only gonna do like a few more minutes and I'm gonna play this video. So I promise I'm not gonna take, because I got stuff to do today. But I just wanted to come and like share some stuff with y'all. But with the Walgreens thing, they was down there. Walgreens was down there. They put Lincoln Pharmacy out of business. This is the childhood penny candy, now laters type. You know what I'm saying? This is what we can a penny candy. This is what jump. They like they to me. It's like they the ones invented penny candy. Lincoln Pharmacy, man, stop it. Lincoln Pharmacy invented penny candy. It wasn't no penny candy around here. Lincoln Pharmacy and then they had one in the Heights. Uh, Abraham Lincoln. That was the only penny candy type shit in Peoria. I know my history. So anyway, or 505. 505 had penny candy. I knew my penny candies. Straight up. That's funny. I knew my penny candies. But to make it I'm making a point. So to make a long story short, so Walmart came down there. And that's like if you had a girl, that's like where you would go get your Valentine's gifts, your Mother's Day thing. So we really, as kids, we really fuck with Walgreens. We were like, damn, we didn't know what was going on. All we knew was like, damn, this is convenient. There's a Walgreens. If you even if you live on South End, you could walk to Walgreens, get your stuff, and walk back home. That was like a good adventure trip, a good Sunday trip. If you had no car, just walking to Walgreens and getting you something, or walking around looking at something. And then Walgreens is like they got their money, or what if something happened. I think they might have used the same scenario, people stealing, and they took their business. They went to Main Street. We was like, damn, well, we can't walk to Main Street. We was like, damn, that's kind of bogus. And then Lincoln Pharmacy gone. We was like, fuck. You know what I'm saying? So we felt that at that time too. But I guess it was cool. I mean, drugs was okay because you still had like Kroger's, and you had Kroger's, things like that. Fast forward to today, Kroger's closed. So to get these drugs, and they get more expensive, they taking them further away. People finna have problems getting drugs. So we found this little documentary, and I was letting people watch it. I'm saying this, I don't agree with everything. I can't say that, but it's interesting, and that's the only reason I'm playing it, because it's interesting, and it talks about why uh, there are food deserts everywhere. So this is part two. I'm playing a little bit up for you.
Well, what you really loved was being with your family on Sunday and sharing a meal. It wasn't the pig's feet, you know? That's not what it is. That's not the fried chicken that's bringing the family together. The family is coming together and cooking. It's an act, the act of service between people, the camaraderie, the catching up, the talking. Those things don't need unhealthy habits to exist and be the tradition.
It's sad that this recipe that you grew up with is the reason that a lot of your older relatives are in the state that they're in.
You eat how your mama eat. You got the same diseases your daddy had. We prayed over that nasty stuff. You know, God bless this slavery food that we won't stop eating.
We no longer have to do this. Sad fact is that as African Americans, we are carrying the last vestiges of slavery on our plates. It's not soul food, it's plantation food. This is not our traditional heritage. This is not the way West Africans traditionally ate. West Africans had agrarian-based communities where they grew their own crops, had diets that were built around whole foods, whole grains, vegetables, no dairy, very little animal food.
A lot of what we ate were plant-based. And if we ate other beings, it wasn't all the time, every day, all day long, extra, extra, extra. It was what we needed, and that was it.
A study conducted by the University of Pittsburgh showed that when Black Americans adopted a more traditional African diet, high in fiber, fruits, vegetables, low in fat, with little to no meat, after only 2 weeks, they started producing more anti-cancer molecules in their bodies, proven to protect against colon cancer in particular. In the same study, when Black Africans switched from their traditional foods to an American diet, their bodies produced microbiota that were cancerous. African Americans suffer more than double the rates of hypertension than people in West Africa. But as Western diets have begun to pervade the African continent, hypertension goes with it.
So it's not like a biological thing with Black people. It's something about being here that's making Black people sick.
If we look at prostate cancer, it is about double in African American men compared to white men. If you look at colorectal cancer, it's higher in African Americans compared to whites. Cardiovascular deaths, same story. This is not due to any difference in genetic factors, because when we look in Africa, we don't see higher rates in Blacks in Africa. We do see it in the United States. It's food.
As a doctor, there's a lot of foods that I'm concerned about that that my patients are eating. And I would say at the top of the list are processed meats. And those are foods like ham, bacon, hot dogs, sausage, salami, cold cuts, sandwich meats. These are really prevalent everywhere. And a lot of people don't even recognize these foods as being processed meats. These are foods that are well known and documented to increase the risk of cancer as well as heart disease and diabetes. So these are foods that really don't belong in the diet at all.
There's a direct correlation with the amount of animal food in the diet and the incidence of chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, stroke, high blood pressure, autoimmune problems, so forth.
There's so many studies that show that a high animal diet increases your risk for cancer. Are they still selling hot dogs?
According to the World Health Organization, looking at over 800 studies found a direct link between processed meat and cancer. It's a group 1 carcinogen, the same group as tobacco and alcohol, definitively causing cancer in humans. According to the report, 1 hot dog a day increases your risk of developing colorectal cancer by 18%. Eating 2 servings of processed meat a day, like bacon for breakfast or cold cuts for lunch, has a similar impact on risk of colorectal cancer as smoking. And yet these foods are served every single day in public schools, hospitals, prisons, and government facilities. If you were to take the lunch tray from a public school, a hospital, and prison and mix them up like a 3-cup shuffle, you wouldn't be able to tell which is which.
You know it's bad, but you gonna feed it to your child. Like, that's a baby. You love the hell out that baby. You feeding that baby something that could possibly kill him it could kill him now. It's kids with cancer, that stuff deep as a mug.
We know that red meat, beef is related to cancer of the colon, cancer of the stomach. Smoked fish is related to cancer of the stomach.
And some people say, oh, chicken is good. Chicken is better. Then chicken is just as bad. It clogs it just as bad, if not worse.
People think of chicken as a health food because it's promoted as being healthier than foods that are really, really bad for you.
For men with prostate cancer, eating a lot of chicken increases the risk of the disease progressing 400%. Chicken is the #1 source of sodium in adult American diets, directly linked to high blood pressure. It's also the #1 source of dietary cholesterol. Women who eat lots of chicken also have higher rates of UTIs because chicken meat is so laden with bacteria. According to a 2012 FDA study, 95% of chicken breast sampled were contaminated with fecal bacteria.
The big problem is that people are getting 93% of their calories either from animal foods, meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products, or pleasure trap chemicals that are added to food, things like oil, salt, and sugar, to stimulate the dopamine cascade of our brain and lead us to overeating.
Sugar and salt is like coke and dope. I'm addicted to the salt, the sugar. I'm addicted to the grease. You know what I mean? The whole shebang.
Sugar, one of the biggest drugs on the planet. And our babies are totally addicted to this stuff.
To the average 2 to 7 year old that's only about this tall, what's eye level in the grocery store? Come on, talk to me. The candy. That's what it looks like to them. So through their lens, you're not gonna have a healthy conversation about avocados, man, and watermelon and plums and peaches. You're not.
When you say sugar, then it's things that have the added sugars to it, which is basically all processed food. It's why a grocery store is the size of department stores. Well, because 80% of the store is processed. We have a health food aisle in the grocery store. That it makes no sense to me. The whole thing should be health food, and then you have an aisle of junk, you know, if that's what you want.
So when you add sugar to a food, you're adding unnecessary calories and you're adding a substance that does not promote health. But when you eat foods that are naturally rich in sugar, like fruits, you're actually getting fructose, or the sugar in fruit, along with fiber. You're getting it with antioxidants, you're getting it with phytonutrients. And that whole package together is an extremely healthful package. Fruit has never been shown to cause diabetes. Fruit lowers the risk of heart disease. It lowers the risk of stroke. It lowers the risk of cancer. It lowers even the risk of diabetes. It helps people lose weight. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with eating whole fruit.
We naturally crave sweet. Why? Because sweet is fruit. Sweet is healthy, right? But the food industry uses our natural tendencies towards these foods against us, hijacks our palates by giving us these over-salted, fatty, sugary foods. It kind of turns our natural biological impulses against us.
When you're having a lot of added sugar, it fulfills the same areas of enlightenment as some of these street drugs. So it's highly addictive, and we've thrown it in everything in the United States in the last 20, 30 years, especially in the form of high fructose corn syrup, which definitely acts in a different manner than glucose does. I mean, numerous studies have shown that. You know, that's another thing that you find in a lot of these urban environments, you know, is first ingredient water, second ingredient sugar, or high fructose corn syrup.
Corn syrup or other corn products are in virtually all processed food. Corn is one of the most heavily federally subsidized commodities in the U.S. In 2017 alone, the federal government gave out over $5.1 billion to help corn farmers grow even more corn. These taxpayer subsidies have kept the price of corn products artificially low, making things like corn oil and high fructose corn syrup ridiculously cheap. No surprise, we can see corn in virtually all junk food. Even the meat people are eating is connected to corn. Farm animals eat the majority of corn grown in the U.S. as a cheap way to fatten them up for slaughter, even keeping the price of meat artificially low. With all the federal subsidies, the meat and dairy industry received $38 billion to prop it up and to keep unhealthy foods cheap. That's more than the entire spending for all Section 8 housing vouchers. Only 11% of low-income households receive federal assistance, while more than 38% of U.S. farmers receive federal subsidies. That's the real welfare issue. If you take into consideration all the externalized costs of the meat and dairy industry that are imposed on society, a $4 Big Mac would actually cost $11.
If animal products were priced where they should be without all the government support, without all the government welfare that's being added to the equation, very few people would even be able to afford these animal products.
If you look at, say, the meat industry, everybody knows it contributes to heart disease. Everybody knows it contributes to cancer. And yet, what gets subsidized the most? The feed grains going into the cattle, going into the pigs, going into the chickens, so it makes meat cheap.
The federal government gives massive subsidies to commodity food producers so they can make cheap, processed food, which makes their profit margins higher. The reason the government does this is because food corporations pay for congressmen's re-elections through their lobbyists to push through these policies. It's a pay-for-play system. Over the last 30 years, the meat, dairy, and egg industries have given over $134 million to U.S. congressmen.
And so the government really doesn't have an interest in looking out for the health of the population because the government basically is being controlled and run by corporate interest, period.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture, along with Health and Human Services, is responsible for creating the dietary guidelines for Americans. These guidelines, formerly known as the Food Pyramid, dictate all federal food policies. The committee responsible for creating these guidelines has been made up of people that have received money from the meat industry, fast food industry, sugar industry, alcohol industry, and virtually all processed food industries.
So whether they're working for these entities or being lobbied by these entities, that's really what's going on. There's too much money in the sickness for them to actually do their job, which is supposed to be to look after the country.
The people that are telling us what's right or wrong are paid for by the people that aren't doing necessarily what's right. Whoever has the most money is the one that ultimately makes the law, and that doesn't make it right because most of the people that had the bread cheated.
The food industry is very conscious of influencing government policy by controlling how they spend their money. And apparently we're electing people to office that are vulnerable to being influenced by that money and how it's spent.
When I reached out to federal representatives for questioning, I got no response. One of the few politicians willing to speak out about this issue is New York City's Eric Adams.
So although we have a crisis that the Department of Health is trying to fight in childhood diabetes, childhood obesity, childhood asthma, the Department of Health is spending millions of dollars to fight that crisis. Yet every morning in New York City, we feed 980,000 meals to our children that causes childhood diabetes, childhood asthma, childhood obesity. So we're feeding the crisis that we have. Our senior centers, our hospitals, Department of Correction facilities, those prisoners are not running out to their local 7-Eleven to get junk food. They're being fed by the institutions. So when you start to do a real analysis of this crisis that we're facing, and you start to look at the hidden hand, you see that government is feeding the crises. And once our folks start to realize that, listen, man, you guys have been playing us. There's one thing Black folks hate, don't play me. And once they realize they're playing us, there's going to be a game changer throughout the entire country that's going to sweep the entire globe.
Another major food program the government oversees is public food assistance. So I went to speak with government food policy expert Kyle Ash.
SNAP is formerly called food stamps. It's the main food welfare.
Hello, my name is Charles T. White. I'm the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer for PCCO, our local community action agency here in Peoria.
Program in the United States. It's providing food assistance to about 10% of the US population. SNAP participants are worse off in terms of diet-related disease. If you're on SNAP, you're more likely to be obese and suffer or die from almost every single diet-related disease. $80 billion a year is what the SNAP budget is. I mean, that's a lot of money. Most of the money is going to buy animal products or junk food. So it makes total sense that Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, the large makers of soda would want things to stay the way they are, right? Imagine if in a food desert, say in Southeast DC, where people can't walk to a grocery store to buy produce. But if USDA prioritized healthy food, so the SNAP dollars had to go to something that was healthy, that actually provided nutrition for the people that rely on it, the bodega would stock that stuff because that's the money that they're getting. They're getting SNAP dollars. They will start stocking healthy foods. You'll start to address the problem of food deserts. The onus is on the government to change the program. It's a government program. Let's empower SNAP participants to eat more healthfully. That seems to me a more appropriate frame for a public health policy.
The soda and junk food industry has a long history of lobbying the government to keep unhealthy foods as part of federal programs. Fast food junk can actually be bought with federal SNAP dollars for certain people in certain states.
Industry will do any darn thing it can to protect its turf and protect its income, even if it means that you're going to pay a price, even if it means your family is going to have higher mortality. That's what they'll do. They will not stop.
The history of government food support programs is almost sinister in the sense that it's a way of agribusiness enriching itself under the guise of helping poor people. They essentially overproduce these commodity foods and then sell them to the government, which then dumps them into communities of color. And the producers get richer and the communities of color get sicker and poorer.
The government even oversees a federal marketing program called Checkoffs, created to promote these unhealthy foods.
And you've probably heard some of the advertising slogans like the incredible edible egg or milk, it does a body good. That was a state checkoff program. The milk mustache was a checkoff advertising program. There's the whole slew of them. The federal government oversees the ones that promote kind of the worst food products. The official purpose is promotion, research, and information. And so they create these research programs, the only purpose of which is actually to drive the economic interest in whatever the commodity is. So in this case, they decided, hey, well, maybe we can sell beef to young mothers and have their infants be eating beef as their first solid food. This is the, your 5-month-old kid should eat beef.
It literally has the beef stamp at the bottom of it. Like anytime you see a baby and the beef stamp, there's something wrong.
The food system is selling us things that's not what it says it is. It's advertising things without full disclosure.
When you got the money, you got lobbyists, you got the FDA behind you, and then you can put up all these ads on TV and, you try to control the narrative.
Commercials and ad campaigns work. It's just, you see how good this looks? It's good for you. Even though if it's literally death on a plate.
They tell kids, you gotta love this, you gotta love this. And they tell parents, this is cheap food. You can feed your family with this.
We're not eating this way just because we woke up and said, let's eat garbage today. It's because that was what is purposely fed to us.
What's happening now is people are getting access to highly heated, beaded, treated processed foods, and it stimulates their dopamine cascade and essentially sets up almost a similar situation that you see in addiction.
They're trying to make money from us, even if it's at the expense of killing us. It's like being a drug dealer. So when I was a drug dealer, I really had no conscience of the drug addicts and what my effect on my drugs did to them. And I think that's just how a person that sells food feels. They just don't really look at their consumer. They don't care about their customer. They just want the money.
And the way that these unhealthy, horrible foods are being just dumped into these communities, we need to see that as much of a threat as we saw crack being dumped into our communities.
The crack epidemic has decimated communities. But even at the height of close to 14,000 crack and cocaine overdose deaths in the US per year, that still is not even 1/40th of the number of deaths from just heart disease.
It's 600,000 people dying of heart disease every year. Those are lives. You know what I mean? As bad as the police is in our communities, they ain't even that bad. They ain't bad as the hamburger.
It's really killing way more people than police brutality is and inner city violence. People are dying, in droves of all economic statuses.
Of course, police brutality matters. Of course, we should be outraged. Of course, we should have a movement to stop that. But if it's about lives mattering, we have to recognize it on the same playing field as police brutality. You know what I mean? It's diet brutality, substance brutality, access brutality. Because poor diets kill more brothers than pistols. We fighting for our lives like Michael Vick's pit bulls.
As Black men, we're dying off so quickly in so many ways. We definitely say the fork is worse than the gun.
We're dying more from poor food than we are from any other thing.
You just die slow. Your family just watches you die.
I see families being torn apart by death, whole entire families being decimated by preventable diseases.
Going to the funerals where at the repasts there was fried chicken, chitlins and all these things that were the very things that contributed to the death of the person that we were mourning.
Looking at all this death, I started thinking about all the people involved in these companies. I wondered, how do they sleep at night knowing what they are doing to children, families, and entire communities? So I started digging. Popeyes, one of the world's largest fast food chicken chains, found predominantly in Black communities that uses almost exclusively Black people in their marketing, with Black spokesperson Annie, is white founded, white owned, and historically white managed. Church's Chicken, a popular fast food chain in Black neighborhoods, is also white owned and run. KFC, owned by Yum Brand, is again predominantly white owned and operated. The stereotype of black people loving fried chicken seems to be of white making. And while these companies' products aren't exclusively killing black folks, it's clear to see that they have targeted the black and brown community.
We're the number one target. A poor brown man is the number one target. And then I feel like everybody else is a target too. Even poor white people, even middle-class white people, because they don't know what they're putting in their kids' bodies.
They have pushed and marketed their garbage products on us. It really felt reminiscent of the drugs being dumped into the communities. These companies don't care about the people that they sell to any more than the drug dealers do.
The alcohol industries, fast food industries, tobacco industries target communities of color.
They target all of us, but especially when you're in an impoverished neighborhood, you're super, super targeted.
The way that we eat can have a direct impact on our mental functioning.
The youth that I work with, they only have access to like fried food or fast food or just like junk food. If people are consuming that, they can't focus in the classroom. They can't be high achieving students. They can fill those positions at the Burger King or the McDonald's, right? They don't need a college degree for that. So that's intentional, right?
You know, starting from the children, the foods that they're eating in school lunches directly impact their ability to learn, directly impact behavior. And then they try to put them on medication, and the medication has all kinds of side effects, and it's just like this vicious cycle.
You got kids addicted to fast foods, addicted to sugar. So when you try to give them food that's good for them, they choose not to eat it.
It's just like, selling crack to a crackhead to the extent that it becomes addictive, because at that price point, you can get a certain fix. So you get that escape.
A lot of people think about unhealthy foods and often associate it with disease like cancer and high blood pressure, but it is something that directly affects the brain.
The fact that we even have this idea of like a mind and a body, though they're separate entities, is really kind of bizarre. If it affects your body like that, how could it not affect your mind? It's like we don't get cut off at the neck.
The effects of sugar and the chemicals and artificial sweeteners on the brain. Our neurotransmitters are affected by all these chemicals and pesticides on our foods. That's right. It's affecting the software.
How we eat affects how we act. So if I want to keep a certain culture down, or doing stuff to each other, or always mad, angry, poor this way, not thinking correctly, I can feed them dirty food, bad water, all that.
Stress is a silent killer. And I see that as a huge factor among African Americans who carry a lot of stress.
People who eat meat have higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol in their blood. According to one study, eating meat increases stress hormone levels higher than the stress of losing a spouse.
Animals experience hormones. They experience cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, and fear, and that is like a vibration, and it goes out into them. Just like serotonin, when you're happy, you're releasing serotonin into yourself. So think about those seconds before you die. You're releasing all that fear into the flesh, and then it's slaughtered, and then it's prepared for someone to consume. So you're consuming a vibration. You're consuming that fear. You're consuming that cortisol.
We know that there's a connection between our emotional and mental and physical. We know it, we just ignore it because it's easier to not pay attention to it.
That's the brainwash. You're eating it and you have no.
Living with opioid addiction can be a struggle. Trapped in a cycle of opioid use, withdrawal, and cravings. Sublocade is for adults with moderate to severe opioid addiction.
No concept of this is the reason that you're sick.
These situations, first of all, are not happenstance, they don't just happen. I think that they're carefully orchestrated. They are the result of people who see an opportunity to exploit others.
And the next thing you're going to ask me, do the cigarette companies know that their cigarettes are not healthy? Do the alcohol companies know that there's a problem? Of course they do. The food companies don't understand that what they're selling causes significant health compromise. Of course they know exactly what they're doing, but their job is to make as much money as possible.
We can see this was their kind of explicit motive to target these vulnerable communities. And so no wonder we see these kind of rates of disease because of the kind of junk that's being funneled, targeted, advertised in these kind of communities.
Communities of color not only have toxic food dumped in them, but also literal toxins. Hazardous waste sites like landfills, incinerators, and industrial factories are disproportionately located in communities of color, making African Americans 3 times more likely to die from pollution. In fact, Americans of color experience 63% more pollution than they even create themselves. A prime example of this is factory farms. Factory farms, where most animals are raised, produce an obscene amount of pollution in the form of animal waste. Factory farm animals in the US produce 44 times more waste than humans, and virtually none of it is treated. North Carolina's pigs alone produce the waste equivalent of 60 million people, enough feces and urine to fill 15,000 Olympic swimming pools every year. In factory hog farms, pigs are raised in giant warehouses. The waste they produce runs out into massive open air cesspools. The liquid feces and urine is then sprayed untreated onto fields, polluting the air, water, and surrounding community. And to no surprise, these operations are disproportionately located in communities of color.
When they started spraying animal waste right here, it came over here just like it was raining. Who blows animal waste on another person? You get a headache, you start gagging, you feel like you want to throw up, and the ammonia is attacking your eyes. And the more you breathe it in, the more it takes away your breath. And if you go inside, it's not as bad, but you can still smell it inside. There's no way you can keep the odor out.
Some folks from Johns Hopkins University came down and they did a study. They took these Q-tip swabs and they went inside people's homes. They swabbed the walls, they swabbed refrigerator tops, microwave tops, tabletop, couches, children's toys, coffee tables. Everywhere they swabbed, they found animal waste, and it was pig waste. We have almost 10 million pigs in the state. We have more pigs than people.
These are factories where you can have a building 500 feet long that has 22,000 chickens in it. You can have a building half that size that has 1,000, 1,500 hogs in it, all producing enormous amounts of waste. Where's that waste going to go? It goes into the environment, into the communities.
You go up this creek, and this CAFO's on both sides, and you see these ditches just running into the stream. It's just pure, straight hog waste running off these fields. We are drowning in animal waste in eastern North Carolina.
If the river's not healthy, people aren't healthy. If the people aren't healthy, probably something in the environment, the river, not healthy.
People are getting sicker here. They're dying earlier. They're staying sicker longer.
When you look at the impacts from these CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, whether it's hogs or it's poultry, they were strategically located in or near communities of color.
If you are African American in North Carolina, you're almost twice as likely as a white person to live within 3 miles of a swine CAFO. If you're Native American, you're more than 2 times as likely.
And so we call it environmental racism. We don't think that it was a mistake that these animals are being found in our communities. The industries perceive the people that have the least amount of economic and political power to fight them off.
The state has an obligation to rectify that. They have an obligation to stop permitting that.
Well, personally, when I started complaining, Hog Farmer came over and I was at the end of the road here mowing grass and he had a stick like he was going to hit me with it. And they came over here twice with a gun. They came over here and shook my mother around. She was sitting here in the living room and he went in and he grabbed onto a chair and started shaking her. And he cursed her and was telling her that he could do anything to me that he wanted to.
The pork industry is like the mafia to me because these industries have an awful lot of capital and they don't mind spreading it amongst our government. If you follow the money, you will find a lot of pork money up in our legislature. They do the dirty bidding for this industry. Stop electing these people. They don't care about you. They've shown that.
The pollution from factory farms doesn't stop in North Carolina. Raising animals for food is one of the leading causes of climate change, deforestation, water pollution, and species extinction around the world. I wanted to visit a pig farm for myself to see what all this shit was about.
I'm Tom Butler, and we're at Butler Farms in Harnett County, North Carolina. I'm a contract grower for Precious Farms, and we have a feeder to finished operation here, and we keep about 7,500 hogs here.
And would you say that smell that we're getting now, is that like an average or is that low or?
Yeah, it's strong today. It's strong today. Pretty strong.
Would you happen to know like a range of how far out the scent can go?
Well, I live probably a half a mile from here. And sometimes I can smell it as strong at my house as I do here. Wow. The lagoon odor, we've heard of people that said that they smelled the lagoon odor probably 3 miles away. So somebody that's not used to it, it's a little bit overwhelming, you know. First big complaint I got was from a neighbor. He called me one night and said that inside of his den smelled like hog poop.
What is exactly under here right now?
6 million gallons of pig poop and sludge. Yeah. And this is actually a spray field. That's a spray field. And we put out about 3.5 million gallons of waste each season. On this farm, we collect 6,000 tons of CO2 and methane each year.
Tom's farm produces the same amount of CO2 pollution as 800 homes.
If you want to go inside, I would recommend putting on some clothes.
Okay.
Because you'll smell bad.
Stepping into the shed, I was overwhelmed by the smell. It was nauseating, and honestly, it smelled like death. Being protected from head to toe and seeing the animals covered in each other's wastes, crowded together, realizing that 97% of all pigs are raised the same way, made me think back to all the pork sandwiches, ham, bacon, sausage, and hot dogs I had ever eaten had come from a farm just like this.
When they poop, it just goes right down into the cracks, and then we flush it once a week, one time a week.
Okay. Do you ever like spray this down, or just it automatically just kind of washes down itself?
We wash it once every 20 weeks. Hogs in a CAFO environment is much more manageable. It has issues like with disease and crowding and this type of thing, and we know that can cause the superbug issue, where they have a bug that antibiotics do not have any effect on them.
Tom's openness about his farm and industry was shocking, but nothing was as shocking as what he said sitting in his office after taking off his mic.
This is a traditional tobacco farm, and I spent the first half of my life killing people with nicotine and tobacco, and I've spent the second half of my life up until now killing people with pathogens, polluted groundwater from hawthorn. As far as I know, that being unethical or acting in an unbusinesslike manner, it's not illegal. It's not against the law, but it's just commonplace now what we do.
Tom's callousness showed a total disregard for life in general, not only for the health of the residents of the surrounding communities, consumers, and animals confined in these sheds, but also the individuals that have to work in these factories.
The workers at the slaughterhouses or factory farms, and many of them are immigrants who don't have a legal permit to work in the country, so they are very vulnerable. They are paid low wages, and they are very exposed, and they cannot really speak up for the treatment that they suffer. In some slaughterhouses, they even have to wear diapers because they cannot even take breaks to go to the bathroom. It's no surprise that many slaughterhouse workers become desensitized, or they have other problems, psychological problems after that. They also become more prone to be violent to other humans as well. These people are poorly treated, and they are just also victims of these systems. Most workers who work there is.
This game, you're not ready for it.
They are working in these places because they have no other options.
Some of those with no other options are people locked up in prisons. Some slaughterhouses and meat processing facilities use imprisoned people as labor. People serving time for nonviolent crimes can be forced to violently kill, dismember, and butcher hundreds of animals every day.
It's really mentally disturbing as far as what you're dealing with. They really wanted me to get on the saw and saw the cows I have. A lot of people got sick working there, I guess because of from the blood, and it's like bloody everywhere, so really a real health hazard kind of place, you know what I mean? Once they give you a job, you have no choice but to work it. I don't think it helps you better yourself. I don't really think it helps a person to better themselves by doing things like that. This is a social justice issue. Yes, I really believe, and I know in my heart that it is.
The history of prison labor linked with violent industries doesn't end with slaughterhouses, though. Imprisoned people's labor has been used to make military uniforms, body armor for combat, and police uniforms. African Americans are disproportionately wrongly convicted, charged, and sentenced to more severe punishments than their white counterparts for the same exact crimes, filling private businesses disguised as prisons with predominantly people of color. These prisons lease or contract out imprisoned people to private companies to make the uniforms for the very same system that put them there. It has been argued that this is nothing more than modern-day slavery. The filthy conditions of these slaughterhouses and factory farms that people are forced to work in are perfect breeding grounds for disease. Factory farm workers are more likely to be infected with respiratory and immune-compromising illnesses that can spread to the entire community.
And it's actually, at the moment, it's a crisis because in these farms, they utilize, for instance, antibiotics to make the animals grow for production. In fact, today, the animal farms are consuming more antibiotics than antibiotics are consumed in American hospitals.
In fact, close to 80% of all antibiotics sold in the US are fed to farm animals. Not only is this creating dangerous, untreatable infections like MRSA, but superbug viruses as well. Most of the world's killer pandemics have come from raising and eating animals. The 2009 swine flu pandemic that killed over 500,000 people around the world originated from a pig farm in North Carolina. The most recent pandemic, COVID-19, which originated from eating animals as well, has disproportionately killed African Americans. African Americans are over 3.5 times more likely to die from coronavirus than white Americans. Indigenous communities are being particularly hard hit. At the time of making this film, half of all COVID-19 deaths in New Mexico were Native people. But this isn't the first time. The history of Western livestock diseases is responsible for killing over 56 million indigenous people in the Americas through smallpox, avian flu, measles, and more. It has even been purported that these animal diseases were used as biological weapons to kill Native people with smallpox-infected blankets. Europeans not only inflicted new diseases on indigenous people, but they also forced their European diet and foods on colonized populations, perhaps the most egregious being dairy.
Historically, we know the Europeans brought over the cows, the chickens, the wheat, all things not native to the land, and imposed this way of cooking, right? You go to any chef school, it's always French-based, which is dairy.
The single most problematic food that I see in practice is the consumption of dairy products.
Cow's milk, which is what most of us are talking about when we're having dairy, is made for a baby cow. And if you aren't a baby cow, then it is not a perfectly designed food for you.
It never made sense for me, like why we would drink a cow's milk and not a human's. I just don't logically understand that.
Dairy products are a collection of compounds that people can ingest, but they are no more of a food group for humans than tobacco. You can choose to ingest tobacco, but you don't need it, and it's not good for you. And the same is true of dairy foods.
In fact, dairy is linked to quite a few health harms, including heart disease, stroke, a variety of cancers, and it's linked to autoimmune disease, as well as a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms like gas or bloating for people who are what we used to call lactose intolerant.
Prior to the mid-1960s, people thought lactose intolerance was a disease. And in 1966, researchers went to the Maryland House of Correction, and they tested white prisoners and black prisoners. And what they found is in the whites, lactose intolerance, very rare. In the African Americans, very common. And it wasn't just African Americans, it was Asian Americans, Native Americans, everybody other than Caucasians had a very high rate of lactose intolerance.
It's actually the normal state of things for most of the world to actually not be able to process lactose.
And yet we're still pushing it and we're still talking about it as though it's a small problem. If you are eating something that you are not able to digest, that's a problem. That's not going to be good for you. We shouldn't be saying you need milk at every meal if you can't digest milk.
There's something really insidious about the way that government agencies are promoting and pushing dairy in particular.
Wait a second. What about the majority of communities of color that can't even digest it?
African Americans being 75 to 80% lactose intolerant. East Asians, somewhere around 90%. Indigenous Americans, even higher, up to 95%.
I think we're so used to the disruption that dairy causes in us that people are just kind of like, well, you know, I get a little bubbly in the stomach or have gas for 5 hours. I'm like, that's a problem. You shouldn't be doing that. So
dairy is the worst. Dairy's almost worse than meat. It's so awful. It's one of the cruelest industries on the planet. Your dairy is factory farmed. It is mass produced.
Without question, it's our most important food, containing phosphorus and calcium that build healthy bones and teeth. And thanks to modern dairy science, these elements are made more valuable by the addition of vitamin D.
Dairy foods have never been shown to improve bone health. In fact, in the Harvard Nurses Health Study, the women who consumed the most dairy products had the highest risk for hip fracture.
We know that dairy is a high risk factor in prostate cancer, for instance. It's also the #1 source of saturated fat in the American diet, which is, of course, a strong risk factor for heart disease.
When we eat animal foods, there's a lot of hormones there.
Dairy foods are very high in estrogens.
Estrogen that your body doesn't make, we call that exogenous estrogen. It attaches to hormone receptors in the body. So which tissues have hormone receptors? Breast, prostate, ovary, uterus. Those hormones attach to those tissues and it makes things grow.
The proteins in milk are often associated with aggravating many of the inflammatory conditions and allergic conditions. High blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, ankylosing spondylitis, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, as well as some forms of cancer, including lymphoma.
We have seen how the government makes a lot of money off of partnering with, remember the whole Got Milk campaign? We all know that drinking a cow's milk is not good for you, right? And that you can get calcium from other sources. It doesn't have to be from cow's milk, and I don't even know what that is. It's disgusting.
Now, they tell you that the government's out there to protect you, and they have strict rules that say that, milk products can't have no more than 750,000 pus cells per cc. I guess if there was more than that, it'd be like pure pus. I think that drinking milk essentially is like finding a festering wound on a cow and sticking a straw in it and sucking.
Makes you just want to puke thinking about it.
So the single biggest advice I give to patients, #1 on the list, is stop the use of dairy products.
It's important for people to recognize that not only do we not need to drink milk, but we can actually get all of the nutrients that we might find from milk from healthier sources, namely plant foods.
The schools, the school districts, everybody has an economic incentive to force kids to take and drink dairy-based milk.
A kid who might be lactose intolerant, and he says, I can't drink milk. Could I get an alternative to milk? The answer is nope. You take the cow's milk. That's it. Federal law says he is not allowed to have an alternative, and they are not allowed to offer him an alternative unless he brings a note from a parent or a physician saying he's got a medical condition. It's totally normal to be lactose intolerant, and those kids should be able to drink something that won't make them sick all afternoon.
That's just a classic of kind of institutional racism within the, nutritional world.
There's no other word to describe what is happening when a government agency knows that something is harmful for a group of people, pushes that product on them anyway. That is injustice. That is racism, plain and simple.
Systemic racism plagues virtually every facet of our society. Before we even have a choice about food, we are up against terrible odds. Black babies have 2 times the infant mortality rate as white babies, and our mothers are 4 times more likely to die from childbirth. If you don't believe that racism plays a role in this, Black newborns are 3 times more likely to die when cared for by white doctors than when cared for by Black doctors. By contrast, the mortality rate of white babies is largely unaffected by the doctor's race.
Mortality rates at birth for Black women is through the roof. And that's because of the poor treatment that's given. We're not given proper aftercare at all. We die often at home after the birth without giving.
The best things never change. They just get better. Like Hardee's Original Bag, just $6.99. Choose from juicy charbroiled double.
Giving proper instructions or follow-up, and just in the hospital often, and that's just par for the course.
No wonder why so many African Americans have distrust for the medical system. The Tuskegee study, carried out by the U.S. government from 1932 to 1972, is one of the most infamous forms of medical racism in U.S. history. Researchers allowed hundreds of Black men to suffer needlessly for decades and die in agony, depriving them of proven and effective medical treatments in order to study the long-term effects of untreated syphilis in Black men. This was a government-sanctioned study to literally watch sick Black people die. And this wasn't that long ago. African Americans' rightful distrust of doctors has led to people being less likely to seek early medical treatment or avoid hospitals altogether. Americans of color are also painfully aware that a doctor's white coat doesn't cover up the legacy of racial inequality in the medical system.
So it's if you make it through the birth process, then we start with the garbage food, and then we start with the other things that are gonna catch you up one way or the other.
It's about money over people's health.
We are consuming a diet that is built around animal foods, not because they're the healthiest foods to eat, but it's because they are foods that are produced so that people can make money.
Today, half of the American population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Half.
Diabetes means there's too much sugar in the blood. The sugar we're talking about is glucose. Glucose is a good thing. Glucose powers your muscles, powers your brain, powers all of you. And the problem in diabetes is that the glucose, the sugar, is staying in the blood and insulin isn't doing its job. Insulin is the hormone that's supposed to get the sugar into the cell. It's not working.
In the case of diabetes, we know that an excessively high-fat diet can contribute to insulin resistance.
Cheese and dairy products, that's the number one source of saturated fat that drives cholesterol levels up. Right behind it is meat. Meat is the number 2 source of saturated fat.
When you eat animal protein, animal fats, it decreases the effectiveness of insulin.
If you look at type 2 diabetics, they have more, not less insulin, but it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because there's insulin resistance. Obesity certainly is associated with diabetes, and reducing obesity is a desirable goal, but ultimately it comes back to controlling what you put in your mouth.
You know, I talk to my uncles, and they're like, I grew up on McDonald's, and I grew up on ribs and this and that. And it's like, okay, and that's why you lost your leg 2 months ago from diabetes, because of that. But they don't equate one to the other.
It's rare that you go into some like Black kid's house and there isn't an uncle in the back room with his leg cut off that you never see. It's not often that I meet someone that doesn't have it or doesn't have someone in their family that has it or someone that died from it. You know, 1 out of 3 people is supposed to have it in the next 10 years. It's a very common thing.
African Americans are 2 times more likely to end up blind or visually impaired due to diabetes, 2.3 times more likely to lose a lower limb, and 3.5 times more likely to end up on dialysis than whites because of diabetes complications.
Obviously, once you end up with a leg amputation or kidney failure or heart disease from your diabetes, you're going to lose an average of 17 years of life.
When I learned that I was diabetic, type 2 diabetic, was losing my vision in my left eye, I had permanent nerve damage in my hands and feet. My right thigh had serious nerve damage. I had an ulcer. Cholesterol was through the roof. High blood pressure. The black package. You know, I mean, you know, we know the song.
Yeah. So the complications of diabetes are really awful, any one of which would be awful. But getting your blood sugar down with diet and lifestyle, you can prevent all of those horrible complications.
Your diabetes is not caused by a metformin deficiency. It's caused by food. And we've got to tackle the food part of this.
Eating just 1 serving of processed meat a day increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 51%. No other food comes even close to that. Dr. Neil Barnard and colleagues conducted multiple peer-reviewed replicated studies showing that when people suffering from type 2 diabetes remove animal products from their diet and replace them with whole fruits and vegetables, they were able to reverse the disease.
When you go on a whole foods plant-based diet, your body becomes more insulin sensitive. You can reverse type 2 diabetes. You need less and less insulin or other drugs like that. And under your doctor's supervision, most people can reduce or oftentimes get off of insulin altogether.
About 80% of our type 2 diabetics will be able to achieve normal blood sugar levels without the use of medication. They can re-establish health and maintain health.
3 weeks, my vision's totally cleared up. In 3 months, the ulcer went away, my nerve damage went away, my cholesterol went from a 217 to a 57, my A1C went from a 17 down to a 5.7, a pre-diabetic level. No medicine. All food, healthy food, good food. And it was the realization, it was an aha moment that it was not my DNA, it was my dinner.
Untreated diabetes also causes heart disease. Cardiovascular disease is still the #1 killer, despite all of the research, despite all the procedures and all of the information that's been out about cardiovascular disease.
So cardiovascular disease, combination of heart attacks and strokes caused by stiffening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, which is caused by the standard American diet and lifestyle.
In heart disease, there are atherosclerotic plaques in the arteries.
Plaque refers to the buildup of cholesterol particles and other inflammatory particles inside of our blood vessels. So not only is the blood flow blocked as that plaque grows inside the blood vessel, but the plaque itself can rupture.
One of the bumps breaks open, that triggers a blood clot. That's all it takes to stop the blood flow through that artery. And everything downstream gets no blood flow, no oxygen. The heart muscle there dies. If this happens in your brain, the part of the brain dies.
That's still the number one killer and what we should be really concentrating on, because for some reason we're not doing better with that. And it's probably one of the easier diseases to treat. All these diseases are symptoms. When your blood pressure goes up high, it's not, okay, the disease is high blood pressure. It's a symptom. Your body is trying to tell you, there's something that's not right here.
High blood pressure, which we've talked about, is one of the leading contributing causes of death and disability. It's so ubiquitous that the majority of people, by the time they reach 65, have high blood pressure, and it's a preventable and treatable illness.
So wait a second, if most of us over age 60 have high blood pressure, maybe it's not a disease, more just a natural inevitable consequence of aging. But no, we've known for nearly a century now. 2 years at this Royal Kenyan Hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted in one study. How many cases of high blood pressure did they find? 0. Wow, they must have low rates of heart disease. No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of arteriosclerosis was found. So we've known that there is not epidemic heart disease among people that are centering their diets around plants, but you don't know its cause and effect until you put it to the test. When researchers took people with heart disease, put them on the kind of plant-based diet followed by populations that did not get epidemic heart disease, their hope was, say, maybe we could slow the disease down a little bit, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery. Look, if that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the #1 killer of men and women, shouldn't that be the default diet to proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also be so effective in preventing, arresting, or reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming.
My own uncle suffered a heart attack and passed away. It shook my family to the core losing him too young. And the thought that his heart disease was a treatable condition hurts even more. If eating plant-based can reverse the world's major killer diseases, why aren't we hearing more doctors talk about it?
In medical school, nutrition has really been overlooked. Now, that would have been defensible if it weren't for the fact that nutrition is the single biggest factor in causing the diseases that we're dealing with. If you look at how doctors get their information, it's through continuing medical education, almost all of which is bankrolled by the pharmaceutical industry. They don't make a dime if you're healthy. They don't make a dime if your disease goes away. They make money if you are sick and stay sick.
There's no money in wellness. It's money in keeping people sick.
If you look at most of the sales of things that go across the cash register at the drugstore, it's for things that are not designed to cure the disease. They're designed to manage it. So let me get you on medications for your diabetes and you'll never come off. Let me get you on medications for your cholesterol. You'll never come off it. Medications for your high blood pressure. You'll never come off them. That's the idea.
And the reason the doctor knows they'll be on drugs the rest of their life is because the doctor's guaranteeing them if they do what they're told, they'll never get well. They'll be sick forever.
If taking a pill solved our problems, we would be living the longest because we consume almost half of the world's pharmaceutical drugs, yet 39, 40, 41 other countries live longer than us. Taking the pill is not the answer. Can it be used as a tool, especially short term? I'm for that, but there has to be a game plan to get it off. And there has to be justification for it.
The cure is not lucrative for anyone. Keeping people sick is very lucrative.
There's the diabetes machine where it's just a money-making machine. And once you start here, you never get out of it.
So of course they're not going to talk about it because it is set up to keep you sick.
There's no money in curing people, but cures exist.
Now you want pills, you want medicine, you want dialysis. Everybody's getting paid except you. You hurting.
Your health is not their main priority. They're trying to keep you sick.
Big pharma and pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars off of all of us.
The government is involved, the educational system is involved,
Versace, bright crystal. At Macy's, the fragrance destination.
How's it going?
Going well. That's that new guy energy.
Oh, he's back. That's the fourth fucking time he's done that.
So you're peeking at probing.
Speaking with serious intent to probe.
Alpha 2, we might have guys starting to move on our position.
Copy. We're getting a buildup of activity here, too.
Yeah, I definitely see weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have definite massing.
Redman 08, this is Profane. We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
This is Frogman 6 Romeo. We need evac at our last known position. We have severely wounded. Who's the severely wounded? It's not you. It's me. Who is it? No, it's not you. No, it isn't.
Copy one. We're in contact 2.
You coming to you or you coming to us?
Stand by. We'll let you know when we're inbound.
Let's move!
Here's the plan. DA 5 minutes, over.
The scouts are going to lead us out, and I'm bringing up the rear. Pop smoke. Smoke out. We are all coming back.
OP1, they are en route to you.
3 minutes out! 3 minutes!
Eyes on me and only me. Has anyone looked at you?
I'm fucked up.
2 minutes out! 2 minutes!
Where are you guys?
Look for the blood and the smoke.
Multiple bad guys trying to get to our position.
Inbound! Inbound! Find cover! 1 minute out! 1 minute!
We have enemy on our building and all surrounding buildings.
Roger that. Stand by. Going hot.
You gotta get ready, man. This is gonna hurt.
On my count. 1, 2, 3.
Pharmaceutical, the medical industry, all of it.
The pharmaceutical industry spends more money on lobbying the government than any other industry. In 2018, out of 535 U.S. representatives, only 21 didn't accept money from pharmaceutical companies. The U.S. is one of only 2 countries in the world that allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise to consumers. No wonder we consume close to half of all prescription drugs, while being only 5% of the world's population. Not only do we consume more, we pay more. Americans are charged on average 300% more for medications than the world average, making healthcare in the U.S. the most expensive in the world.
You don't have to say it's a conspiracy to see that it's a conspiracy. And then when you look at the numbers and the communities that are impacted, you clearly show that there is a reason we are not doing anything to stop this crisis.
Hospitals, doctors, and the pharmaceutical